Yo, what's up, Kings? I was listening to an audio recording, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, and there was a line that really struck me this time around. He said that two people could be in the same field, doing the same exact thing, using the same tactics, but one of them would get tremendous success, and the other person would be stuck in mediocrity. And the difference between these people is that the first person would be doing things in the certain way with a capital C. And when I heard that line again, I was actually reminded of the story of Napoleon Hill. More specifically, the fact that he had written his books, his main ideas, several different times, but they only really took off when he wrote Think and Grow Rich. He had written a much bigger almanac of ideas on success called The Law of Success in 16 Lessons, but that book really didn't make an impression on people's minds. But there was a special energy, there was a special that he gave into Think and Grow Rich, which is why every time when I open that book, I'm hit with a special force. And it ties directly into the powers of NoFap, the powers of Brahmacharya, the powers of cultivating this life force energy. There is an etheric force given to the life force energy that allows you to get that something extra in your work. And this makes all the difference. What I want to address with today's video is how NoFap affects your mind and how it affects your achievement power. And some of the words that I'll be drawing from are from another book of Napoleon Hill's called Grow Rich with Peace of Mind. Napoleon Hill says this: "It is within every man's ability to transmute some of his sex emotion into a dynamic drive which brings success. This ability grows with your willingness to use it. Young men often make the mistake of seeing only the physical side of sex, so that they are in their 40s or beyond before they begin to use transmuted sex energy to add value to everything they do. There is no interference with the physical side of sex, which in itself becomes a life-transforming power. Now and then a book catches fire, and the author of that book has the satisfaction of knowing that he has added something permanent to the knowledge of man. So it has been with my book, Think and Grow Rich. I have asked a number of people why they Think and Grow Rich has sold so briskly for almost 30 years. These people tell me that the book is somehow more inspirational than the others, and I think I know the reason why. I wrote it twice. The first time was in 1933, while I was on the staff of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. As I recall, I just sat down and wrote while I was serving the president, without making any effort to condition my mind, so that personal magnetism would be projected into the book. It was some years later that I decided to publish the book. When I reread the manuscript, I saw that it lacked something. The answer to what it lacked was actually inherent in one of the chapters, a chapter on sex transmutation, of which this chapter is a summing up and a carrying forward. I had written a book full of information but lacking in transmuted sex emotion. Now I rewrote it from start to finish, and the effect has been electrifying. Anything you do can be electrifying and positive and profitable when it is infused with sex emotion. What is sex transmutation? When you see sex as the great creative force, creative not merely in terms of children, but also of all that is noble and enduring, then you are ready to see what sex transmutation can do for you. It is a focus of sex energy into other channels where it adds immeasurably to one's power of achievement. It is not in any way a lessening of sex energy, but rather a shifting of that energy as though a central powerhouse had for the time being sent its pulsations into a different transmission line. It is also a focusing of personal magnetism, which is really no different from sex energy. If you are more familiar with the term personal magnetism, well and good, but remember it is rooted in sex. I've said this a couple times on my channel now, but there is something extra. There is something very unique about people who have that special energy. A person could be one of the greatest public speakers with regards to having all the tactics and strategies and having put in thousands of hours, and there's definitely a potency and a power that goes alongside that. But there's a different potency that comes from people who just have that emotion, who have that personal magnetism, and it's one of the reasons why, like, great gurus, great rishis, great saints, you could just be in their presence and feel inspired. They don't even have to say anything, and just their sheer association can lead to inspiration within you. And it is that something extra that really gives credence to the work of an artist, of a performer, of an entrepreneur. Napoleon Hill gives the example of a guy who had come into his office to try to sell him on putting an advertisement in the World Almanac, like a World Almanac advertisement placement. And he said this guy looked like a tramp. He had beard growth. He had like a really unkempt beard. He was smoking a cigarette, and that the ashes of that cigarette were falling onto the carpet. And yet this guy sold Napoleon Hill with $800 worth of advertisement placing on that World Almanac. And Napoleon Hill went on to reflect on this, and he said, "This man had tremendous personal magnetism. I heard it in his voice, so I listened to him. I felt it in the aura of his personality. For the time being, I really gave consideration to the World Almanac's advantages, which proved out fairly well. But if that man, who automatically used the principle of sex transmutation, had straightened himself out in other ways, he might have owned the World Almanac instead of merely being one of its spacemen. I now watch for the phenomenon of sex transmutation in everyone I meet and have thought back upon others I have known. It is obvious that those who win the greatest success in all occupations and in all walks of life have high sex capacities which they transmute at will. They may not know that they are doing it, but that is what they do. Watch for the something extra and you will see it. In every generation, there are only half a dozen men who are universally recognized as great violinists. Some hundreds play the violin very well, but beyond them stand the few who have that something extra. It is the more successful transmutation of sex emotion. Of course, the same applies to pianists and other musicians. It is the same with political leaders, with lawyers, with athletes, with craftsmen. I discovered that a highly sexed bricklayer could lay nearly twice as many bricks in a day as a man who lacked that intensity, and lay each brick with the greatest skill. You know, it's funny. I had an audition just this morning. If you've been following my channel for any period of time, you'd know I'm an actor, and every once in a while I do get these auditions. And this role that I went for, it's like this really great part. It's perfectly attuned to me. It's the role of an Indian American who also is fluent in Hindi, which is kind of a harder casting role to find. Usually when I get an audition that I feel I'm so perfect for, it had freaked me out in the past. I think there's a strange awareness that casting directors always have when they can sense that an actor or an artist has a desperation about trying to get that part. Like, if you want the part too badly, or if you have, even on the most subtle level, you communicate a level of neediness towards going for that part, then you definitely will not book the role, because somehow that neediness is a real turnoff. I think the same thing applies in dating and maybe in making business deals. You know, the person who cares less often has the upper hand. And I used to care so much, like, how am I going to be perceived? Can I do this correctly? Can I do this right? And now what I find is that, I mean, I don't want to overspeak on myself, but I'm finding I have that something extra to the capacity where I don't really care. And it's so weird to not care that much about the results of something that you love doing and a role that you might be so perfect for. But I don't really care. I really do. I really am starting to feel like that pianist or that violinist who's transmuting this energy into their artistry. And so for me now, it's just about that expression. It's not so important of getting it or not getting it, but in that effect, in that frame of mind, I'm actually finding that I am striking gold more often. I am now working more as an actor than I ever had before. I'm getting more work here than I was in the 2.5 years that I spent in Hollywood. And I think part of that is I'm transmuting some extra energy into my performances. And more than that, I have a framework of coming up just being full of myself, full of what is within me. And so I'm not reeking of that same desperation that I did maybe when I was younger. I have also seen many instances in which sexual energy appeared to be the igniting spark, so to speak, of the sixth sense. This great creative faculty lifts brain action far above its ordinary limitations. It is the psychological receiving antenna of those inspirations we call hunches. It accounts for the still small voice, which now and then gives priceless guidance to the perceptive mind. Beyond the mind and the subconscious mind lies the unseen, which gives life to it all. And can this somehow be a function of sex? Why not? When all the world is male and female, and even the basic building blocks of the universe are oppositely charged particles which constantly interact. Swami Sivananda, in his book The Practice of Brahmacharya, had said something very similar. He said, if you want to find out about the secrets of the universe, look to nature. You'll find that elements, particles, that are charged, that are not pair bonded, that have an electromagnetic pull, they're the ones that have the most explosive chemical reactions. And chemicals that are pair bonded, that do have their what we call valence electrons completely filled, they're octet filled, they're inert. They don't do any damage. When you watch for the something extra, you will see it. And when you watch for what could be the something extra, but instead has become the something wasted, you can see that too. You can see that the man who could succeed does not succeed because he does not understand that sex is more than physical passion. Being desirous is one of the most potentiating, powerful things you can have in your life as a man. And it inadvertently will cause results to come into your life, even if you're doing the same tactics as someone else. Like Napoleon Hill said, he had written this book twice. He had written The Laws of Success in 16 lessons, and no one read it comparatively. And then he used transmuted energy for the first time, and he applied that into Think and Grow Rich, a more condensed, potent version of that same knowledge, the same words, and it took off. And it took off in a big way. You can either succumb to that desire through these releases of your creative faculties, or you can withhold them, and then you can just, like, this is you, this is like a peach of life, and you can just chomp down on life and just feel the juices gushing on your body and just like devour the world with this energy. And so that's what we're all doing. If you're new here, my name's Nikhil. This channel is about mixing Eastern spirituality with Western productivity so that creatives and entrepreneurs can empower themselves and bring to life the artistry within them. I also draw a lot of inspiration from storytelling, cinema, novels, biographies. So if that appeals to you, definitely subscribe. If you like the video, please leave it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to connect with me further, you can reach out to me on Instagram. I do respond to all DMs. And with that being said, gentlemen, greatness is coming for all of us on this journey. Cheers.